All right, everybody, welcome. That's right, another live stream here. WB here, and we are live again. This is episode 8 here on Talking Certs, and in this one, this deep dive, we're going to be talking about CompTIA Server Plus. That's right, SK0-005. So what do you say, everybody? Get in, let's get ready, and let's dive in. Well, it is nice to see. Thank you, everybody, for joining me here. Like I said, WB here, and a little bit about myself. You can find me out on LinkedIn. You can find me on Gmail, too, as well as on X, and join our community Discord server so that you can continue the discussion as well. I am WB here, and I'm looking forward to taking a deep dive here on Talking Certs into CompTIA's Server Plus SK0-005. Keep in mind that we also have the links in the description below. If you happen to watch this after the fact, remember that if you want to see additional live streams and all the content that's going to be released, I always ask you to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell so you're aware of all the things that are coming out. Remember to, comment, like, share, and join us on our company, our community Discord server, company, whatever. Join us for continued discussion. So what do you say, everybody? Let's dive in. Let's dive into our lesson here. We're going to start by, like we always do, by talking a little bit about the exam domains. Exam domains and how they're going to break down. The reason that we go through the process of doing this is to make sure that you're aware of some of the areas where you should spend a lot of your time and focus. So definitely want to be aware of the percentage of the domains. We have 4 in this one. We have seen other exams where we have up to 6 domains. This one has 4, but don't let, like I say, don't let the the quantity of domains fool you. You are going to definitely have to study. This is a professional level certification. And the very first domain is server hardware installation and management, coming in at, well, 18% of the overall exam, right? So I want to stop here just for a second, and I want you to remember, those of you that are maybe coming over from A+, right? The Server Plus really is like an A+ for enterprise-level servers and those type of technologies. So if you already have some A+ under your belt and you're coming over, you're going to be doing really good, because a lot of the information that you'll have to recognize. Some of it, a computer is a computer. I was talking to this to one of the other members of our community Discord server supporting the channel out there. Shout out Furious George. That, we were both talking. He mentioned this, and I second it. A computer is a computer, right? And like we were discussing, it's just what role does it perform? What function does it have inside of your network is really going to dictate, its overall functionality. So just know and be glad that if you already have some A+ training under your belt, that is going to help expedite your training here for this 18% weighted domain. Next up, coming in 2.0 here, this is really the largest of the overall exam domains and the weights here, so definitely pay attention to this one. We're going to put a lot of lift into the server administration, or domain 2.0, coming in at 30% of your overall exam weight. Definitely want you to focus in on this one, definitely. So now the next one that we need to be aware of is 3.0. And when we look at 3.0, we can see that this is security and DR, or disaster recovery. This is coming in at 24% of your overall score. So those of you that have had maybe some Network Plus there to add, one of the things that I like to see is in the A+, right, and you're taking that and get a little bit of security, not a lot, but a little bit of security, right? And then you get into Network Plus, a little bit more security, and then obviously if you get into Security Plus, it's all Security Plus, but that information is going to help you here too tremendously when we talk about Server Plus. And it's one of the reasons I encourage people to take the core foundation, A+, Net Plus, Security Plus, because in a lot of the other exams here, all of that information is going to come roundabout, and it's really going to help you out, especially here in this certification when we talk about security. Then we have, last but not least, coming in at second, all right, when we talk about overall domain weight, this is domain 4.0, and this is troubleshooting. It comes in at a whopping 28%. That is right, 28% of your overall exam objectives. So keeping in mind that is 100% of the overall breakdown of the exam. All right, before we move on, I want to take a second here and I want to just address the chat room here, make sure that we are not missing anybody. All right, very good. Oh, and hey, Furious George, as always, again in the chat room. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. Let's go ahead, what do you say? And we'll continue this journey, because now what we typically do here when we have our Talking Certs, each episode we not only break down what the domains are and what you should be aware of, we also take the time to break down the required skills. These are the verbs. You might have heard them before if you've ever discussed Bloom's taxonomy. Oh, goodness. But it does give you an indication of the skills that are going to be required for you to perform on the exam, and it should help you to drive your studies. When you combine that with the domain weights, right, if 30%, right, of our domain or our weight of the domain is going to be server administration, and I see given a scenario tells me to install something, right, it means that I'm actually having to apply that information, right, implement it, right. These are all different synonymous terms for the application of what you're learning, right? So that's what we're going to break down here. What do we need to do, and how many darn times does the objective require us to do this, right? So the first thing is I like to break down given a scenario, because we see this a lot. I know that initially this doesn't help you because given a scenario, do something, right? What do we mean by that? Well, again, when we say do something, we're going to find out some of those somethings that we need to be able to do. But keep in mind that, so scenario-based, 12 of your overall sub-objectives across the domains have that given a scenario. So it is something to be aware of. Now, given a scenario, well, what do we do, right? Well, there's a variety of different things that we have to do. The first one is explain. Explain. This appears 8 times across the objectives. So the good thing is, mark these objectives, these sub-objectives here, right? The 8 different objectives here that say explain. And when you tackle it with your studies, remember that's flashcard material, right? Because you need to be able to have that conversation with me. What is a port and protocol? What is, this fiber channel connection, right, that we have to know about high performance networks for servers, right? So again, being able to explain it back to me, right? Think flashcard level material. Then under those, we also have a couple more. One of them is summarize, and summarize appears 5 times, right? So now you have a total of, what is that, 13 domains for my bad math? That really the focus is flashcard level material, definitions, being able to have that conversation with that technology. So in those aspects, one of the things I love about the CompTIA exams is they're telling you, hey, you have to be able to sit down and have a conversation, and that's the level of experience, the skill that we want you to have in that. Now, don't let that simplify or oversimplify, the potential solution, right? Yes, simple fixes first, but I do want you to keep in mind that just because it says to explain something in its flashcard material does not necessarily reduce the complexities of a potential scenario-based question that you might get where you have to explain this. And same thing goes with summarize. And then the last of this, like I said, kind of having that conversation, right? The understand skill level that's required, right? And that's identify. And when we look at identification, right? This appears 1 time. So according to my bad math, we got 14 cases of objectives that really want you to be able to have that conversation. Have that conversation back with me. Have that conversation with yourself if you have to. If you've got a study partner out there and they're helping you and you're helping them, have that conversation back and forth. Correct each other. And mark down notes too where maybe you've got it wrong, and that can help you out. But now we're going to have to get into some skills where we really need to be able to the practical application. How do we work with the technology? And that's where this first one comes in. Notice this one's install, appears 2 times, right? Now we actually have to be able to work with the technologies that the objectives are calling out. And the same thing goes with perform. Perform, you see this 1 time. Another thing we have is deploy and manage. Deploy and manage comes up once, right? So now think again, I want you to keep in mind that, hey, now we have to be able to work with the technology. Same thing here. We also have manage. Manage appears once in our objectives. We also have apply. So I know apply kind of comes down to the what is the required skill level, and then everything kind of nests under this. But again, applying settings, that happens twice. And then we also have configure. Configure standalone appears one time, but then you also have a configure and maintain, right? So again, notice that we've got quite a few of these exam objectives, that are requiring you to be able to actually work with the technology. And it's so hard to say this without actually putting the verb back in the definition, right? And then we have troubleshoot. And troubleshoot actually appears, that's the 3 troubleshooting domains that are in domain 4. There's one other one. There's actually 4 of them. It goes from 4.1 to 4.4, if I remember. The very first one's explain, but that's explaining the troubleshooting methodology, which, if you want, leave a comment below. We can actually do a pretty good deep dive in the CompTIA troubleshooting model, because it comes up in Network Plus, it comes up here in Server Plus too, and you might see it in other certifications. It has formally, by the way, been taken out of the A+ 1200 series, so while not strictly called out for every one of, being able to know the adjacencies of the ideas, it's still kind of implied, but not formally called out anymore. All right, so that is the required skill levels, right? When we talk about the required skill levels, the thing that we've got here now, we've got to kind of break these down, and we have, we're going to group them by skill level. Let me go ahead real quick and take a look at the chat room here. Very good, very good, very good. I wanted to make sure that I'm not ignoring anybody out there in the chat. Thank you. Shout out there on the live stream to IBM Museum out there. Thank you as well for joining. Remember, everyone out there, if you want to join us too, we have our community Discord server where a lot of times I'm going to tell you ahead of time when certain live streams and videos are coming out, and we can always continue this discussion after the fact. Shameless plug here, like, subscribe, comment, share. Let's go ahead and move on, talk a little bit about the skill level that we need to know and group them together inside of our Server Plus SK0-005. All right, so we've got 3 that I want to break these down into. We've got understand, apply, and analyze, and the very first one is understand, and you can see that we have 3 categories under understand. Boy, that is the definition of redundancy. See redundancy. But you can see here total, we do have our 14 different objectives that really just require you to have that conversation with the technology. But then we've got quite a few. We've got, I believe, about 7 of them that are at the actual working with the technology, the practical application, so they fall under apply. And under apply, you can see we have, well, apply by itself. We have install, perform, configure. We've got configure and maintain. We've got deploy and manage. And we've also got manage as standalone too. The last one I'll kind of, we'll put it under analyze, and that's the troubleshoot. We got the 3 troubleshooting. Like I said, the last domain has 4 in there. Remember that one of the sub-objectives under domain 4.0 is to explain the troubleshooting methodology. All right, everybody. So with that said, what do you say we go ahead and let's take the time and let's jump in. Let's go ahead and jump into our breakdown of the objectives, right? So this is the portion of time where we take the time and we want to kind of go into every one of the exam objectives, talk a little bit about some of the concepts that you're going to face with each one of these, and just really have an idea of what you're going to be tackling when it comes to this exam. So going into the first domain, we've got a lot about the hardware, right? Remember, the very first domain is that hardware installation and management. And when we look at domain or objective 1.1, this is given a scenario, install physical hardware. This is where we're going to have to know about server racks. We're going to have to understand what an RU is, unit size, what's a rack layout. We have to know a lot about network cabling and some of the various server components too. We also have to understand power redundancy concepts, all very important here in this objective. And then as we move on, we move into 1.2. And when we move into 1.2, I also, by the way, as we go through these, I want you to pay attention to the verbs that we mentioned combined with the given scenario, again, because as you start to get more familiar with the objectives, you can you can plug these back and say, okay, so I know that the domain 1.0 server hardware installation, I know it's 18%. I know this is given a scenario, I have to do something, right? What do I have to do? I have to install something, right? So now this is the practical application of that information. Same thing with deploy and manage. So like I said, just because server hardware installation and management has a small amount of the overall domain weight, don't let it fool you in what the required capabilities or skills are going to be. All right, so in that domain, 1.2, given a scenario, deploy and manage storage, we're going to be looking at RAID levels, right? So know your RAID arrays, 0, 1, 5, and 10 comes out a lot, but I will tell you this is where something like RAID 6 is going to come into play. Right? So you have to be able, again, deploy and manage these. So again, do I want, when we talk about RAID, do I want just performance, no redundancy? I'm using RAID 0. Do I want redundancy? Might take a performance hit. That's where RAID 1 comes in, the mirroring, right? Do I want mirroring or do I want parity? But I also want to have kind of the aspects of the stripe. That's where RAID 5 comes in, right? That's where you get that striping with distributed parity, as it's technically called. RAID 10, that's the nested hybrid RAIDs, right? A RAID 1 with a RAID 0 combined, if you will. But then the RAID 6 also comes into play, where it might not have come into play inside of the A+ exam objectives, because RAID 6 is more of an enterprise level implementation, very expensive, because now what we have is, unlike RAID 5, which is striping with distributed parity, this is striping with double distributed parity. So being able, again, to know some of these things, the interface types that we've mentioned, again, also a carryover of some of the stuff that you really should be aware of when we talk about your A+. Now, I will tell you one thing, though, to keep in mind, though, where some technologies kind of trail by the wayside in A+, you're still going to potentially have to know peripheral component interconnect, right? And that's one of the things that, again, kind of keep in mind, that we might see PCI slots, that old shared bus technology is more of a legacy thing, but you could still see it server environments. Then we have, given a scenario, we're going to perform server hardware maintenance, right? This is where we have to define things like out-of-band maintenance and how we do get access, local hardware administration, a variety of the different components, understanding that servers have hot swappable components, right? Being able to swap the drives, being able to swap the cards, power supplies, and fans, all while the server is still powered up. We have to know things like our BIOS and UEFI. You're going to have to know the differences. Again, kind of hearkening back to some of you that maybe came over from the A+ training, which is going to come to in our conclusion of the exam and what the requirements are. The requirements are that you should have a level of A+ knowledge, right? It's a recommendation, not required. I'm sorry, recommendation. If I didn't say it that way, not required. So, but if you have that information, lean heavily on that information here. All right, there will be new things that maybe you haven't seen. Right, when it comes to installing server operating systems, the term slipstream and unattended might come in. Right, we talk about those partition and volume types, knowing what GPT, the GUID partition table is versus MBR or the master boot record, all comes into play here as well too. Next up, we move into 2. All right, we move into 2, and you know what? I kind of moved in. Yeah, there we go. So server administration, want to make sure I have all of this correct here. Got to kind of look at some of the different things that we need to be aware of when it comes to given a scenario, install a server operating system. This is where unintended installations come into play, right? We have to know the terms around cloning and imaging. What's the difference between a physical clone, a template deployment? Have you ever heard the term P2V, right? Physical to virtual deployment. So a variety of different file system types, right? And again, a lot of this is coming over and almost a continuation of your A+ training that I would be aware of as well. And the reason I mention that is because if you think about it, I had to know, again, I'm my mind's eye, speaking like a student, I had to know ext4, right? That's your Linux, primary Linux file system. I had to know NTFS, that's our Windows file system. I have to know what VMF is, FS is now. That's the VMware file system. But I also need to know things like REFS, the resilient file system. Notes like that come over from earlier training. Then we have 2.2, and when we look at 2.2, this is given a scenario: configure servers, configure servers to use network infrastructure, and this is where knowing your IP configuration, which should be something you really know by the time you get to this exam when we talk about managing and maintaining servers. So keep that in mind. And full TCP IP configuration, right? I'm just saying IP configuration, but your subnet mask, your default gateways, the preferred DNS server, why you would do that, host name, configuring a server's FQDN, firewall ports, and knowing the difference between your addressing protocols and their implementations when we talk about IPv4 and IPv6. All right, let me take a time here to join the chat here. That's right. That's right. We got a viewer in chat. Furious George, come to Discord. We have cookies. Come to the dark side. All right. Yes, Alex. Let's go ahead and let's move on. We're going to move on out of our network infrastructure here, and let's move into the next objective here, 2.3. When we look at 2.3, this is given a scenario: configure and maintain server functions and features. Now, when we think of features and functions, Furious George, this is what we were talking about earlier in our community Discord server. There was, right, an operating system. A computer is a computer is a computer, right? An operating system is an operating system, but really when we're defining a role, if we're defining what that computer's doing, it really dictates, what function, what functionality, what feature is it, or service is it providing. So knowing your server roles, right? Knowing directory connectivity and storage management, knowing monitoring of your server functions and features. Data migration and transfer is also going to be important here, as well as some of the administrative interfaces that we use to manage these features and functions. For instance, console interfaces, remote desktop environment, more specifically RDP if you're in Windows, using SSH if you're in a Linux type environment, or really anywhere outside of Windows, pretty much. And then things like web portals for server configuration too, all come into play here in this objective. Then we move into about halfway through this objective set, or this domain, I should say. There is 8 here. There are 8 sub-objectives in domain 2. Again, remember that makes up 30% of the overall weight on the exam, right? And when we get into 4.2, this is we're talking about high availability, right? Some of these key concepts, that high availability being how far or how close can we get to 100% uptime, and knowing the difference between like what a 99.95 means versus that 5.9 uptime, which I believe is just like 5 minutes. Just under 6 minutes downtime a year. I believe it's 5 minutes and 20-something seconds, but I don't have the chart in front of me, so don't quote me on that one. The teacher can get it wrong, but I think it's just a little under 6 minutes. You wouldn't have access to your systems within a year, and understanding how we achieve that through fault tolerance and redundant infrastructure, right? Knowing, how we implement network interface card, teaming, and redundancy. Again, shout out to our Discord server. We were just having this conversation. Furious George, I think it was you and I that were having this conversation as well, as what is the difference between NIC teaming, right, and link aggregation, right? We had that conversation, got those resources out there for you as well too, so that if you need a little more help on that subject, you can get it. Then we move into 2.5. We look at 2.5. This is summarizing the purpose and operation of virtualization. And if you can remember, coming over from A+ and Net+, right? Those of you that are maybe following along, you should have already had plenty of these concepts under your belt and really be able to identify them, because they also implement or bring in a little bit of cloud functionality here as well, right? Talks about virtualization. You might say, well, wait a second, Wes, virtualization, cloud, aren't those two different subjects? Well, technically, I guess they are, but if it wasn't for virtualization, we wouldn't have cloud. So under this is nested your cloud models, knowing the cloud deployment models more specifically. It's kind of generic here, but that's your public cloud deployment, private, and hybrid. And which is interesting because they don't include community, where in some of the other objectives, I want to say most of the other objectives that we see, and definitely in Cloud Plus, they definitely call out that as well, too. All right, next up, 2.5. Oops, I swear I will get this right. Watch me struggle. Next is 2.5. And did I do that? Okay, I already did 2.5. I apologize here. I know how sequential numbers work, I promise you. But let's go ahead and move on to 2.6, and that'll just be between me, you, and, well, the entire internet, right? 2.6, this is not the mistake you were looking at. 2.6 is summarize the basics of scripting basics for server administration. This is where you'll take a look at more scripting types, the difference between bash, a batch file, PowerShell, and VBS, knowing a little bit about environment variables, comment syntax, and some of the basic constructs of scripting as well, loops, variables, conditionals, and even basic data types, right? Again, all stuff that you've probably seen if you've been following along in some other certification exams, and I always encourage you to, to refer back to some of those notes as well. All right, so that is 2.6. Again, if I've got my sequential numbers right, hopefully I do. We are at 2.7. And 2.7, that is explain the importance of asset management and documentation. Yes, this is where you get into more of what I would say the bureaucratic stuff here. Asset management, right? This is where we need to know things about life cycle management. What is the asset life cycle to begin with, inventorying, labeling, warranting, documentation management, right? Update service manuals, a variety of different diagram types, configuration and change management, not the same thing, by the way. And then company policies and procedures. This is where some of your terms that maybe you've heard before, maybe in disaster recovery, right? RPO, RTO, the recovery point objective and the recovery time objective, right? The recovery point objective being that measurement of time, the amount of data that you can lose, right, that your company can lose, and it dictates typically your backup frequency and really marks the beginning of your disaster recovery process. Remember, the recovery time objective is a little bit different, right? That's the maximum amount of time that a system can be offline before it causes irreparable damage. But then there are other things in there too, right? BIA, business impact analysis. We'll also see things like service level agreements. So a lot of those documentations that we need to be aware of, and sometimes you might have already seen other ones that go along with it, not included in this exam, but things like memorandums of understanding, all going to be, could be important here likewise too. All right, then we get to 2.8. That's right, we've actually finally arrived at the end of the largest domain here. 2.8 is explaining licensing concepts, and this is interesting because this might be something that is new to you. When we look at the various licensing concepts here too, we think of per user, per device licensing. Well, there's also per instance, per server, per socket, per core, especially when you talk about database management and database infrastructure. There's also other things too, like volume licensing and knowing things like version compatibility, all a part of domain 2.0. So that is a big domain. That is 30% of your overall exam when it comes to the CompTIA Server Plus SK0-005. Now, let's go ahead, let's move into 3.0, but as always, let me take a second here and just look at the chat here and give you a second to pull out the electric cloth here. Boy, is it hot in Florida like it always is. I can't wait till it gets out of the dog days of summer. All right, domain 3.0, let's go ahead and move on. Let's move into our security and disaster recovery module, or domain, I should say. You can tell that I've been creating content here. And that, the first one here is 3.1. When we look at 3.1, this is summarized data security concepts, right? And this is where we talk about different strategies around encryption, whether it happens to be data at rest or data in transit. And this is interesting. This is something that I've often wondered, right? Those are two data states that we agree on. Data at rest, you know, we use disk encryption, right? Full disk encryption, file encryption. Data in transit, secure communication protocols that encrypt that information between source and destination. But while not in here, I would venture to say that data in use is also very, very important too, making sure that the data that is being consumed is only being consumed by applications that have been pre-vetted and approved. But then we also have to know things like BIOS, or firmware passwords, generically, bootloader passwords, and various things that we would use in business impact too. Then we move into our physical concepts or security concepts, right? Now, I want you to think of things like physical access control, right, versus things like environmental controls, right? Fire suppression, heating, ventilation, and AC sensors. Right, think about physical access control, right? How do we control physical access to the infrastructure itself, whether it's signal blocking, reflective glass, right, architectural reinforcements, fencing, security guards, CCTV, security cameras, locks, and a variety of different locks as well, too. Access control vestibules, all important here in this exam objective. And then we move into 3.3. 3.3, kind of a wordy exam objective here. Explain, right? Aha, have that conversation. Important concepts pertaining to identity and access management for server administration. This is a lot of basic information that, again, you maybe have seen before, right? We have to understand the difference between user accounts, user groups, password policies, different attributes of password policy construction, the auditing aspect, multi-factor authentication. This is where we talk about those authentication factors, right? The three everybody agree on: something you know, something you have, something you are, right? So something you know, password-based, knowledge-based, something you have, possession-based authentication, right? Some kind of key fob, an authenticator app, right? Something you are, that's where biometrics come in. All going to come into play here in Objective 3.3. And then we have Objective 3.4, and we look at 3.4. This is explain data security risks and mitigation strategies. This is where we talk about a variety of risks. Imagine that. But hardware failure, malware, data corruption, insider threats, different types of theft, breaches. And then you also have to talk about a variety of mitigation strategies, right? How do we reduce the likelihood of that these security risks will have an adverse effect on our organization? Things like data monitoring, log analysis, two-person integrity, and regulatory constraints. This is where some of those additional acronyms come into play here. You have PCI, DSS, HIPAA all come into play, PII. All right, so next up is 3.5, going the right way, moving forward. Forward sequential numbers, right? We're going to talk about given a scenario, apply server hardening methods, right? This is where we reduce the entry points that threat actors could take advantage of to compromise our systems. OS hardening, application hardening, hardware hardening, host security, and patching all come into play here as well. And then there's 3.6. When we look at 3.6, this is summarized proper server decommissioning concepts, and these are the the procedures and the processes when we're sundowning a system. We could be recycling it, we could be repurposing it, we could be really just destroying it all together, right? This is where we want to make sure that we have proper removal procedures and that we have proper data sanitization. Apologies there, a little cough there, a little tickle in my throat. All right, so next up, we're going to go ahead. We've got 3.7 as well, too. When we look at 3.7, this is explaining the importance of backup and restoration. This is where we're going to talk about things like our backup methods, backup frequency, and backup validation, and our restoration methods, too. All right, so moving on, we have 3.8. 3.8 is the importance of disaster recovery. And when we look at disaster recovery, we have to know site types, replication, and we have to know disaster recovery testing as well, too. All right, so that leads us into the last of our 4 domains inside of our Server Plus SK0-005 certification. As always, I wanted to let you know if you like what you've seen here so far, and if you like some of the other content on the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you click that notification bell. Also, you can find us in our community Discord server, link in the description below. All right, that said, let's go ahead. Let's dive into the last domain, the very first one. We really only have 3 objectives that we have to worry about in this domain. And the first one is going to be explaining that troubleshooting theory and methodology. This is the 7-step methodology that used to be included in the A+ concepts, but no longer included there. I believe it's still included as the network troubleshooting model as well in methodology. So being aware of this, knowing the adjacencies of the ideas and the steps is going to benefit you across a couple of exams, I would say. So knowing this definitely benefits you, like knowing if you're at the identify the problem and determine the scope, what's the next step going to be in this methodology, right? Establishing a theory of probable cause, questioning the obvious, simple fixes first, right? So you have to kind of have that under your belt going into this certification exam, so I would definitely be aware of it. Now, when we look at the next objective here, 4.2, this is given a scenario, troubleshoot common hardware failures, and this is where you'll go and have to be able to identify some common problems, the causes of some of those common problems, as well as some of the tools and techniques to resolve these issues. And then we have 4.3, and when we look at 4.3, this is given a scenario. We are going to troubleshoot storage problems, and again, another one of those objectives where you'll go through a series of common problems, the cause of those common problems, as well as the tools and techniques required to provide a solution for these issues. And then last but certainly not least, we have 4.4. We do have 5 here. I apologize. It goes a little bit farther than I thought. I thought there was only 4 here, but there's actually a few more. So we got 4.4, and when we look at 4.4, some of the things that we need to know here for troubleshooting common OS and software problems. Again, common problems such as unable to log in, right, not able to access resources. Using the telnet command, right? NBT stat, all of these, IP config, probably some that you're familiar with if you haven't already seen them on previous exams you've taken. And then we have 4.6. When we look at 4.6, this is the last of the objectives in domain 4.0. Given a scenario, troubleshoot security problems, right? And again, just more common concerns, right? File integrity, improper privilege escalation, unable to open files. What are the causes of some of those problems? Services that are active or inactive, right? Variety of different things. Virus infection, malware, rogue services or processes. And then some of the security tools that we would use behind this to help with these security problems, things like port scanners, sniffers, telnet clients, anti-malware software, and a variety of attributes of file integrity techniques that we can use too. All right, everybody, so that makes up the entirety of the objectives for the SK0-005 exam. So one of the last things that I want to move into is talking a little bit about the Server Plus exam and some of the information that you should be aware of behind that. And I'll also give you some links as well that you can utilize to go to CompTIA and a couple of other places, well, really another place that you can take your exam too. So let's dive in, talk first about what we can expect when it comes to the Server Plus exam. The Server Plus exam is going to be the exam code. You probably heard me say it. I say it often throughout the entire live stream so that you're familiar with it if you are tackling it. That is the SK0-005 exam. Questions here, they're going to be 90 questions maximum, and the length of the test is 90 minutes. Keep in mind, you'll typically have an intro survey and a survey at the end of the exam. These are not calculated against your actual testable time. So just keep that in mind. Now, the question type, like I've mentioned in other live streams, right? Every question you get is going to have more than one answer to choose from. So to me, they're all multiple choice. But they could require you to supply a single answer to get the question right, or they could have more than one answer. The great thing about CompTIA is they typically tell you how many to choose. And in a scenario where, you know, there's, obviously time is always of the essence, but if you're a little nervous, just remember single answer questions typically have a circle or a radio button, and questions requiring more than one answer have a box that allows you to select more than one as well too. But then you can also get performance-based questions, right? When we talk about performance-based questions, keep in mind these could be drag and drop simulations and a variety of stuff that you actually have to work with the technology. Now, one of the reasons throughout the live stream on CompTIA's Server Plus SK0-005, I've told you that the recommended experience is A+ certification, right? And definitely harken back to that training because that's what CompTIA recommends. Having A+ certification or the equivalent knowledge, which means coming to this and studying these objectives, you should already have the equivalent knowledge of A+. All right, and I always want people to understand that, so when they're taking training and they understand the level of training that they're given, and it doesn't matter where you get it, you have to bring some equivalent knowledge to the table, right? There's probably not going to be a lot of explanation on what subnetting is or what the TCP/IP protocol stack is, right? These are things that you should have learned and bring to the table. So I just want you to be aware of that, as well as a recommendation for 2 years of hands-on experience in a server environment. Now, this is another one of those exams that, like Security Plus, requires you to have a higher passing score. You have to get a 750 on this one to pass, and that is a 100 to 900. Now, I also want you to know that you have some additional resources that you can utilize here as well. You can, and it says Cloud Plus. Again, there is one of the mistakes right there. This is not Cloud Plus, but I will tell you the link is there. By the way, the link is in the description, and it is correct. For those of you that are watching, and those of you that are watching on our rerun, maybe rewatching it after the fact, keep in mind when you hop on over to the Discord server, I will have the link fixed in the resources that you can download. All of the slides will be available for you to download, and I'll fix the error there. And then we also have Pearson VUE. So if you want to take an exam at a traditional location, a brick and mortar location, it does have some of its benefits because they can control all the security. You've got a place to put your stuff. You know, while you go in and take the exam, they control the environment. However, it does require you to go to a physical location. You can search for a location here at Pearson VUE. Now, Pearson VUE also has a platform that'll let you, if you can't get to that location, you want to take it remotely, you can take it online through their OnView platform. However, pay attention to what the requirements are. They're pretty strict for the testing environment that you have where you take your test. And then there are also some system tests that you need to run to make sure that your testing computer will give you a good testing experience, which is very, very important. So make sure that you take the time to do that. All right, everybody, and that said, that really brings us to the end of this live stream here where we've been talking about the CompTIA Server Plus SK0-005 certification exam. I want you to keep in mind that you can always reach out to me. Keep in mind that some of the contact information is in the descriptions below. You can always reach out to us on our community Discord server. Link also in the description below. I want you to have access to that too. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining me. Remember, if you like what you see here, be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell so you're aware of all the live streams that are coming out. Remember, I'd also like you to like, share, comments are always welcome. Join us on that community Discord server. Thank you. Appreciate you joining here. WB for Talking Certs.